Breaking news. Ukraine has just completely flipped the script on the artillery war.
It's huge.
While Western nations are scrambling, paying these extortionate prices for ammunition, Ukraine, they've cracked the code.
They really have.
They are outsmarting Russia with NATO-standard shells at a fraction of the cost. The war of factories has just entered a totally new phase. It is Thursday, January 29th, 2026. Welcome to Defense Report. Before we jump in, if you want to stand with Ukraine and stay ahead of the curve on global security, just hit that subscribe button right now.
Please do.
Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex, joining with Arya in the latest Deep Dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today, oh boy, today we are covering a massive industrial shift happening right now inside Ukraine.
Huge shift.
Specifically, the start of domestic 105 and 155 millimeter artillery production.
It really is a seismic shift. I mean, we aren't just talking about a few new assembly lines.
Yeah.
We are talking about the systematic localization of mass production for heavy artillery.
Yeah.
And it's all on Ukrainian soil.
Yeah.
It's like an industrial revolution happening in the middle of a war zone.
But it's not just that they're making them, it's how they're doing it. We've got some cliffhangers to unpack today that, honestly, they sound like fiction.
They really do. We're going to talk about the Cotton Fields Project.
Right.
And how growing a specific plant down in Odessa might literally save Ukraine's ammo supply from a global chemical shortage that, involves China.
And the price tag shock. You are not going to believe the numbers we have today. A Ukrainian shell costs about, 3,300 euros?
Around that, yeah.
Meanwhile, some NATO countries are paying up to 8,000 for the exact same thing. We're going to explain exactly why that massive gap exists.
And yet, we'll also discuss the sobering reality that Russia is still making them for about $1,000.
1,000.
It's an economic war of attrition, and the margins are just razor thin.
Plus, the Danish model, it sounds like a minimalist furniture catalog.
It does. But it's actually a financial hack that is allowing Ukraine to build weapons with other people's money.
Exactly. Our mission today is to look beyond just the bullets and the bangs. This is a deep dive into the economics of attrition and how Ukraine is building strategic autonomy, all while under fire.
Okay, let's unpack this. Segment 1, the industrial breakthrough. We have breaking reports from Ukrainian armor. They're making a huge move into 105 millimeter ammo. Now, usually the 155 gets all the glory. It's the king of battle. So why start with the smaller caliber?
It's all about tactical flexibility. According to the latest reports, Ukrainian armor is preparing to launch domestic production of the 105 millimeter M1 artillery ammunition this year in 2026.
Okay.
And they're aiming for an annual output of about 100,000 rounds.
That's a significant number. But again, why the focus there? Is the 105 actually, relevant in a war defined by these massive artillery duels?
Oh, crucially relevant. You have to think about the terrain and the units involved.
Huh.
The 105 millimeter systems, like the British L-119 howitzers Ukraine operates, they're lightweight.
So if you're a light brigade or an air assault unit, or you need to move fast through the mud where a 50-ton self-propelled gun just gets stuck, you need the 105.
So it's a mobility play, shoot and scoot, but for lighter units.
Precisely. It's easier to conceal, easier to tow with just a standard SUV or a light truck, and way faster to set up.
Right.
While the heavy brigades are holding the line with 155s, the mobile response units, they rely on the 105s. It just fills a niche that the heavy guns simply can't.
You can't ambush a column and disappear into a forest with a massive Panzerhaubitze.
Not as easily as you can with an L-119, no.
That makes sense. It's the scalpel versus the sledgehammer. But speaking of sledgehammers, let's talk about the heavy hitter. The 155 millimeter, this is where the volume numbers get. Well, they get kind of crazy.
They do.
Ukrainian armor is targeting 240,000 M107 shells and 60,000 extended range shells.
Right. And let's clarify the difference there, because it really matters. The M107 is your bread and butter high explosive shell. It's older tech, not very aerodynamic, but it packs a punch. It's what you use for suppression.
Okay.
The other 60,000 are the extended range variants, most likely the ERFBBT.
That's a mouthful of an acronym. Extended range, full bore, base bleed. Base bleed always sounds violent, but that's just aerodynamics, right?
It is. When a shell flies, it creates a vacuum behind it, which causes drag. It literally pulls the shell back, slows it down.
Okay.
A base bleed shell burns a small gas generator at its base to fill that vacuum with gas. It reduces the drag and can add anywhere from, say, 10 to 30% to the range.
So it's like putting a spoiler on a car, but for artillery.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
A very good analogy. But producing those domestically is a much higher technical bar than the standard M107.
So how did they spin this up so fast? Building high-tech shell factories usually takes years. Did they just cut corners?
No, they hacked the bureaucracy. This is what we're calling the pragmatic pivot.
The pragmatic pivot.
Originally, the plan was to form a joint venture with the Czechoslovak Group, or CSG, the Czech defense giant.
A standard corporate deal, like Ukrainian Czech Shells Incorporated.
Right. But think about the timeline. A joint venture is a whole new legal entity. You need lawyers, international trade approvals, EU regulations, Ukrainian regulations. It takes months, sometimes years, to get the paperwork signed before you even pour the concrete.
And Ukraine doesn't have years.
They don't have time. So they switched to a licensing model.
Okay, so instead of getting married, they just signed a contract to use the recipe.
In a way, yes, that's perfect.
Yeah.
CSG basically provides the technical data package, the blueprints, the metallurgy standards, the quality control, and crucially, the supply chain for the difficult bits like the powders and the fuses.
And Ukrainian armor.
They manufacture the shell bodies, the big metal casing, and they do the final assembly in Ukraine.
That seems incredibly smart. You just bypass all the red tape and start bending metal. But what about the liability? I mean, usually companies are terrified of handing over their IP like that.
They are. But the CSG spokesperson, Andrei Shirtek, he was quite candid about it. He noted that the licensing model was chosen specifically because the joint venture route was getting bogged down in Ukrainian regulations. By licensing, CSG gets a steady stream of fees without the headache of managing a Ukrainian subsidiary during a war. It's just pure efficiency.
And the goal is to stop importing the parts eventually, right? Because if you're still buying the powder from the Czechs, you're not truly independent.
Correct. Right now, it's about 50% localization.
Yeah.
But the roadmap is to get to 80% in the near future. That means making the fuses and the chemicals domestically, too. And that chemical part, well, that's the real bottleneck we'll get to in a bit.
Before we get to the chemicals, we have to talk money. Because this is where the Western defense industry starts to look, well, a bit embarrassing.
It really is.
Segment 2, the economics of attrition. We got a hard look at the price tag for these domestic shells.
We did. Vladislav Belbus, the CEO of Ukrainian Armor, revealed that a domestically produced 155mm shell costs approximately 3,300 euros.
3,300 euros.
Which is roughly 3,500 US dollars.
Okay, 3,300. To the average listener, that probably still sounds like a lot of money to blow up in a split second.
Yeah.
But in the current defense market.
It's an absolute steal. It is bargain basement pricing. Before the full-scale invasion, prices were around 2,000 euro. But panic buying, speculation, supply shortages, they drove Western prices through the roof.
Right.
Admiral Rob Bauer from NATO recently mentioned prices hitting 8,000 euros per shell on the spot market.
8,000. That is insane. 8,000 versus 3,300. That's a nearly 60% discount. Why is the West so expensive? We're supposed to be the industrial powerhouses of the world. Why can't we match Ukrainian pricing?
Because we run a peacetime industry. Western defense contractors are built for low volume and high margins. They have immense overheads, ESG compliance, complex insurance, expensive labor, supply chains spread across 20 countries. They produce Ferraris.
And Ukraine is producing Ford T models.
Exactly. They are stripping out everything that doesn't make the boom. They're cutting out the middlemen, reducing transport costs by manufacturing locally, and, they're likely accepting lower profit margins because, well, national survival is on the line.
When you're fighting for your life, you don't pad the invoice.
You do not.
So Ukraine is beating the West on price. That's great news for their budget. But, and I know you're going to be the voice of reason here, we have to look at the other side of the trenches. What about Russia?
And this is the sobering reality check. Ukraine's $3,300 is a massive victory for Europe, but Russia is still cheaper.
How much cheaper? Are we talking a few $100s?
We are talking less than half. Intelligence suggests a standard Russian 152mm shell costs their Ministry of Defense about $1,250.
Wow.
And even their long-range shells are only around $1,550.
That is disheartening. They're making them for a third of the price of the cheap Ukrainian shells. How their economy is sanctioned, their tech is old. How are they doing it?
It's a command economy. That's the superpower of a dictatorship. They don't have to import the chemicals or pay market rates for steel. They have domestic supply chains that go back to the Soviet Union.
So they own the mines, the rails, the factories.
They own everything. They don't have to pay a markup at every stage. The government sets the price. Plus, labor costs are significantly lower, And the government pumps massive subsidies into these plants to cover energy costs.
And they run them 24/7.
They run their factories 24/7, 3 shifts a day. And frankly, their tech standards for mass artillery are slightly lower than NATO precision requirements. They accept a higher failure rate to get higher volume.
And the volume, what are we talking?
Russia is producing about 4.5 million shells a year. That is 3 times faster than the US and Europe combined right now. It's a machine that just never sleeps.
So, Ukraine is fighting an uphill battle. But that price difference, 3,300 versus $8,000, that's the only way they can stay in the fight economically, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If they had to buy everything at German prices, they'd be bankrupt in a month.
Exactly. It proves that Ukraine can be efficient. But there is a hidden problem that money can't always fix. You can have the money, and you can have the factories, but you still need the raw ingredients.
Segment 3, the bottleneck. This is the chemistry class portion of the deep dive. Why can't we just make 5 million shells tomorrow if we have the steel?
Because a shell without gunpowder is just a heavy paperweight. And right now, the world is running out of gunpowder. Specifically, it's running out of nitrocellulose.
Nitrocellulose. Break that down for us. It's the key ingredient for the propellant, right? The stuff that goes boom.
It is the energetic binder.
Yeah.
It's what makes the boom happen in the gun barrel to push the shell out. To make it, you need cotton cellulose, specifically cotton linters, which are the short fibrils left on the seed after ginning. And here is the geopolitical twist. A huge chunk of the raw cotton cellulose used globally. It comes from China.
I see where this is going.
China has restricted exports of these cotton linters to the West, citing dual-use concerns, basically choking off NATO's supply chain. But surprise, surprise,
They're still supplying Russia.
they are still supplying Russia.
Of course they are. So the West is choked off, Russia's fine. How does Ukraine solve that? They can't exactly order from Alibaba.
They go back to the soil. This is the cotton field solution.
Yeah.
There's an experimental project launching in Odessa, in southern Ukraine.
Wait, hold on. They are growing cotton in Ukraine? I thought cotton was a tropical or subtropical crop. Doesn't it need massive heat?
It typically thrives in, Central Asia, Turkey, the U.S. South. But this is actually a revival of a Soviet-era practice.
No way.
During the Cold War, the Soviets engineered varieties that could grow in slightly cooler climates. So Ukraine is now planting these specific varieties in Odessa to create domestic nitrocellulose.
That is incredible. Literally growing the ammo supply. But is it viable? I mean, Odessa's pretty close to the front.
It's innovative, but it's incredibly risky. We aren't talking about a greenhouse here. They need about 30,000 hectares, that's 74,000 acres, just to meet the shell production goals.
That's a massive amount of land to dedicate to a non-food crop during a war. That's a lot of wheat fields being converted.
It is, and it requires massive investment, hundreds of millions to build the processing plants to turn that raw cotton into gun cotton.
Right, you can't just stuff raw cotton into a shell.
No, it needs complex chemical treatment with nitric acid. Until those plants are built, Ukraine is still a price taker on the global market for propellant. That's one reason the price is $3,300 and not lower. They have to buy the powder from Europe, who buys the cotton from expensive, non-Chinese sources.
But if they pull this off, that's true strategic autonomy. You grow the plant, you make the powder, you forge the shell.
Precisely. It secures the supply chain against blockades or political shifts in China. It removes the single biggest choke point in the entire artillery ecosystem.
Amazing. Now let's connect the bullets to the gun. Segment 4. The hardware and the funding. Because you can have all the shells in the world, but you need something to fire them from.
Enter the 2S-22 Bodana.
I love this thing. It's the truck-mounted howitzer that became famous during the liberation of Snake Island. And going back to our price theme, it seems to follow the Ukrainian trend of being surprisingly cheap.
Incredibly cost-effective. A Bodana costs about $2.5 million.
$2.5 million.
Now, compare that to the German RCH-155. It's a fantastic, futuristic system. It can fire while moving. It's fully automated. It looks like a spaceship, but it costs nearly $13 million.
So you can buy 5 Bodanas for the price of 1 German gun.
Roughly, yes. And for a war of attrition, quantity has a quality all its own. The Bodana works. It has a standard range of 42 kilometers and up to 60 with those rocket-assisted projectiles we talked about.
And production is scaling.
Fast. President Zelensky noted back in April 2024, they were making 10 a month. Now, reports say it's up to 20 or more every single month.
That is rapid scaling. But the Russians are adapting to this, aren't they? You found something in their procurement documents about tactics changing specifically because of these guns and drones.
I did. It's a small detail, but it tells a big story about the battlefield geometry.
Right.
Russian procurement documents showed a massive increase in orders for long-range powder charges for their meant-to-be artillery. They ordered over 1 million of them.
What does that tell us? Why do they need the extra propellant?
It tells us they're scared of Ukrainian drones. In the past, they could bring artillery close to the front line to maximize accuracy. Now the line of engagement is just swarming with FPV drones. So they're trying to keep their artillery further back, out of drone range, but they still need to hit Ukrainian positions. So they need the extra powder charges to reach the front lines from safer distances.
That's fascinating. The drone threat is actually forcing them to change their industrial orders and burn out their barrels faster with higher charges.
It is. It increases wear and tear on their guns significantly. It's a whole cascading effect.
Okay, so we have cheap shells, cheap guns, domestic cotton. But here is the elephant in the room. Ukraine has a massive budget deficit. They are fighting a war. They have the factories, but they don't have the cash to place the orders to keep them running.
This is where the Danish model comes in. And no, it's not a supermodel from Copenhagen.
I was going to say that sounds like a different kind of magazine.
It's a financial model, but a brilliant one. The concept addresses a specific absurdity. Western donors were raising money to buy weapons for Ukraine,
Right.
but they were buying them from Western factories that had 3-year waiting lists. Meanwhile, Ukrainian factories had spare capacity, but no money. It was just inefficient.
So the Danish model flips that.
Exactly. Denmark, and now others like the UK and the Netherlands, allocates money to buy weapons. But instead of buying them from their own factories or from America, they pay Ukrainian armor or other local firms to build weapons for the Ukrainian army.
So Denmark writes a check to a factory in Kyiv. The factory builds the shells and then hands them directly to the Ukrainian soldiers down the road.
That's it. In 2024 alone, this model raised about $560 million. It's perfect because it bypasses the Ukrainian budget deficit, it strengthens the Ukrainian industrial base, and it's much cheaper for the donor.
Their dollar goes further buying a 3,300 Ukrainian shell than an 8,000 European one.
It's a win-win-win.
And I read they're using frozen Russian assets, too.
Yes. The EU has started funneling proceeds from frozen Russian assets into this model. So in a very literal, poetic sense, the interest earned on Russian central bank money is paying for the shells that are being fired at the Russian army.
That is fairly ironic and efficient. So let's wrap this up. What does this all mean for the future of the war?
Well, if we look at the big picture, this is a story of resilience and really ingenuity. Ukraine is localizing production, undercutting Western prices by more than half, and they are literally looking at growing cotton to solve a chemical shortage.
And doing all of this while under constant missile fire, that's the part that blows my mind. These factories aren't in safe zones, they are targets.
It is all about strategic autonomy. By the end of 2026, the goal is for Ukraine to not just be a beggar for ammunition, but a major producer of NATO standard weaponry. That 3,300 price point isn't just a number, it's proof that they can be efficient, maybe even more efficient than the legacy European defense industry.
It changes the whole dynamic. They aren't just surviving, they are building a future defense industry that could rival anyone in Europe.
And here is a provocative thought to leave you with. Russia is producing millions of cheap shells, yes, but their quality is stagnant. They're using old tech, mobilizing cheap mixtures. Ukraine is integrating into the NATO supply chain with higher tech, licensed production.
So the quality gap is widening while the price gap narrows.
Right. So as the cotton fields mature and the Danish model expands, we have to ask, could Ukraine eventually become the arsenal of democracy for Europe's eastern flank? Once the war ends, they will have the biggest, most battle-tested artillery production lines on the continent. Could they end up supplying NATO?
That would be the ultimate turnaround, from needing ammo to supplying the shield of Europe. You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
This is history in the making, and we will absolutely keep watching the numbers.
Absolutely. If you found this deep dive valuable, don't forget, subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.